Yeah, we need one more person. Here he comes. We tried to balance this panel with people coming from different size schools with people coming from library, teaching, as well as IT. So hopefully there'll be something for everybody here. Maybe I'll introduce the panel members first. Brian Donnelly, Director of Instructional Services and Lecturer in Law at Columbia. Trotter Hardy is a professor at William & Mary School of Law. Grace Lee is Electronic Services Librarian at New York Law School. I'm Anna Shavers. I'm a professor at the University of Nebraska. What we're going to do is try to divide these up into categories. First talk about web browsing and the internet, then take some Windows-specific tips, hardware tips, instructional design and presentations, and then some miscellaneous tips with audience tips and questions. Okay, web browsing.
Open a new window. It's always interesting to me when I walk by a lab and I see a student who's got a web browser open and then moves over to the next computer and opens another browser. They could, believe me, the easiest thing to do is I've got a T1 at my school, so I'd like to open a number of windows, especially if I've got a search engine. In both Netscape and Internet Explorer, the command is Control-N, and then all your open windows will show up on the taskbar at the bottom. I think I've gotten to about 6 windows before I've crashed the browser. The next tip we have is...
I should mention this, that also we'll go to, on the slides they have lots of words on them, and if you're thinking trying to write all this down, they're going to post all these to the web, so you don't need to worry that I'm going through the ones that have a lot of words fast.
Okay, there's a shortcut for both Netscape and Internet Explorer. With all you need to do is type in what's between the www and the .com, press Control-Enter. More often than not, the browser will take you to the correct site. So if you put in Microsoft Control-Enter, it would take you to the Microsoft site.
Now, what is it? CALI, since CALI is CALI.org.
Can't do it for that.
Oh, so I picked the wrong example.
I just wonder if it would work. Okay.
It will only work for com.
Okay.
Com. Okay.
Okay, another shortcut key is Control-D. That will let you add bookmarks as you're browsing, and that will work in both Netscape and Internet Explorer.
Another way of getting to a site, or getting a site to your bookmark, is taking this little icon and just dragging it over to where you want it in your bookmarks and placing it, and then you don't have to type it again or whatever. So another quick way to add to your bookmarks. Right.
Yeah, another tip here. I wouldn't claim this is especially clever, but it's one way of getting to a website. If you type it into the run box under File Run, it'll open up the browser and then go directly to that URL.
And now going into specific things about search engines.
Yeah, I thought it was important to mention search engines in that I think for most of us who are used to doing legal research and grew up using Lexis and Westlaw, every word in these full-text databases was indexed. And I think we had a certain amount of certainty that we went into a database that we'd actually find what it was that we're looking for sooner or later. The thing about the World Wide Web is that search engines really only track a fraction of the websites that exist out there. And that, I may be preaching to the choir about this, but I think it's awfully important for law students in particular to understand the way the World Wide Web is structured in such a decentralized way. And that I found a couple of sites here that we mentioned on the slide here that I think are useful in explaining how the World Wide Web works to students at least. And that and if we go to the next slide, in particular, the use of metadata, I think, is something that is one of the few organizing principles that we have for the web today, and that people should understand, what's going on behind the scenes. If you go to a browser and then you go to look at the source of the code at the beginning of a web page, it will show you what meta tags were used, if any, to build that page. And some search engines use these meta tags. Other search engines don't use these meta tags, and I think it's good to know when you go to a particular search engine whether or not it's searching through the meta tags or what data it's using to actually find the information you're looking for. In the next slide, I guess. One of the other parts about this is that with search engine development, really the next step of that is going to be what people refer to as bots, these intelligent agents. And I refer to another site here that I think does a great job of giving you information, useful information about what's going on with the development of that. And another, in the next slide with Google, I didn't learn about this site until just a few months ago, and I think generally speaking, people believe that this is probably the most accurate search engine that's out there on the web right now. When people develop these search engines, there's really this sort of scientific formula that goes into determining what is relevant and what isn't relevant. And so there's this sort of rush to come up with a more powerful algorithm that will actually get you the most relevant information. And I think Google's probably done the best job of that at this point.
That's the one I use now most of the time, and what I like about it is you don't have to worry about the and or r's
Right.
or putting the plus signs or anything. It just seems to get to what you want to get. Another sort of quick thing about searching in both Netscape and Internet Explorer, if you type in your URL location search and then some words, it'll bring up whatever they use as their default search engine to do the search for you.
You can change the default search engine. That's a registry edit.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, wait.
No, wait.
We skipped one.
We have the search thing here.
Okay. I'm back to where it is.
Okay, yeah. I didn't realize this until doing some research just for this panel, but just as AOL has put keywords on as another means of finding stuff on the web, Netscape has come up with this whole keyword scheme. It's probably something, if you haven't used it, you should just be aware of it. The other thing I found is that if you type about Mozilla in the URL box, the location box, that you get this funny quote from the Book of Mozilla. Once again, it's something very obscure that I don't know how many people have ever seen, but you might want to try that. And it's just, I think, kind of humorous.
Okay, I'm a big fan of shortcut keys because I prefer not to take my hands off the keyboard. Another thing you can do is, instead of taking your hands off the keyboard to use the mouse, is just hit the space bar, and if you're at a web page, it'll scroll down. Okay. The other thing you can do to speed up your browsing is by increasing the size of your cache. I've got the instructions here for Internet Explorer. You can do the same thing in Netscape, and you can speed it up somewhat. Okay.
More hints for using your browsers?
So these are the instructions here. We can go to the next slide.
Okay. When I tried this, I looked at Internet Explorer 5. It was a little bit different. So you might, whatever version of Internet Explorer 5 is about the same thing. You need to experiment a little bit and see how you get to this settings screen. But basically, that's what you need to do.
And this slide shows you how you would change your options in Netscape Navigator and increase the cache size. It's also good to dump the cache every so often if you've got problems or the machine seems to be sluggish. Also, in the next slide, you can specify your default download directory, and it is a registry change. I have a different file that I call my files that I like to put my downloads into, and that's what opens up every time when you do a download.
And the instructions will be there on the site.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if this works in all browsers and all versions, but I use Internet Explorer, and whenever you do a download, you have the option to browse to some other folder, and at least in the setup I have, once you've done that, that comes up the next time you want to do a download. So if you don't change it, it'll go wherever. So I have just a folder called Temporary Downloads, and every time I go to download it, it brings that up because that's the last one I use, and that doesn't involve registry changes or anything.
Okay, WinZip is a program or a utility that whenever you get a laptop, this should be the next thing you install after the Norton utilities. Most files, as we know, are in zip format, and this will help you unpack them. The URL is winzip.com. The newest version, next slide please, is WinZip 8.0, and you can open Explorer, tag your files, right-click on the files, and create an archive. You can unzip a file by clicking on the file and dragging it to a new location, and it will unpack them there. Students, for some reason, tend to confuse zip files with the zip iOmega drive. So that's why.
Not just students.
Oh, okay. So this is one of the things I talk about in my Internet legal research class. I talk about some of the utilities you should get for your research.
We should all not go past this point without noting the demise of Phil Katz, the
They got PK Zip, was one of the original Zip programs. PK was Phil Katz, and he just died in the last 6 months or so. So just a nanosecond of silence. Thank you.
ZDNet also awarded WinZip the utility of the millennium, I believe.
The millennium. You might check with your schools. A lot of schools have license agreements for WinZip, and so you can just get it that way. This is one thing that I found a lot of people didn't find is intuitive. A lot of times when you're traveling especially and you want to do something before going online, what with the hotels now charging us for all these extra minutes of being online, you might want to do as much as you can offline first, get that by simply going into your file directory and change it to work offline, and then when you hook up and are ready to transmit, go online. And there's some instructions that you can find. I'd use that for email as well as doing getting to the particular browse URL that I want. The email, of course, you can draft your email and stuff. You can go online, get your email, go offline, and go back and respond, and save some time and money in these hotels.
Traceroute. I think this has a couple of applications. First is that it's a way of graphically seeing what happens to the IP that goes from the internet traffic that actually goes from your machine out to a server, maybe say across the country. And one way to figure out how the packet gets from your machine to wherever the server is on the web is using this DOS command, traceroute. Another way to do it is that there are a number of websites that'll do that. You go to the website and you click on it, and it shows how the packets got from your machine out to the particular website that you've chosen there, through the Yahoo search engine. And it's useful, from a graphical standpoint when you're maybe trying to explain to people what packet switching is. I found it useful in teaching the courses that I've taught. And if the other utility for it is that for one reason or another your browser isn't working or it's slow, you can go and check and see whether or not the packets are actually getting to a particular point or not getting anywhere.
The next couple of tips are something that involve listservs. Some are probably your pet peeves of yours as well as mine when you see all these messages that shouldn't be going on the listserv. So these are sort of reminders to some of you and maybe some more information. Whenever you join a listserv, you're going to get a message back, and usually that message has some helpful information. I created a folder in my email program called subscriptions, and so I save all those messages. So when I want to know what to do on that listserv and I want to do something different, I go and check there. And this is just one, for example, one that I recently signed up for. It gives you all that information, and so it's worthwhile saving it. You can just save it as a text file and put it somewhere else if you want. Pet peeve of mine, when you're away from the office, people send these automatic replies. If you have listservs, tell the people at your place to set their listservs to no mail, so we won't be getting these responses. Getting off listservs, people seem to always get confused about that. I guess this reminder, the first thing is check your message that you got when you first signed on, because it will tell you how to unsubscribe. But the main thing is that there are a lot of different things you try to do to try to get off without just sending a message to everybody that's reading the mails, because that doesn't do any good.
Ask a question. I know on some lists you can append -request to the name of the list, and it will go to, in other words, if it's like the Acme list, if you type Acme-request, it'll go to the list. Is that, I only know that works on a couple of things I've seen. Is that a standard, or does anybody know if all lists work that way? No? Okay. Well, you might try it. If you're having trouble getting off a list, you might just try to take the list name -request and see if that reaches a person who manages the list.
I think it depends on what kind of software the list is actually running on. Because Major Domo is probably the most popular, but I think there are other kinds of listserv softwares that may have different protocols, different syntax.
Duplicate messages. For example, at our school, we recently went through changing out the email, and we thought we were sending out the changes, but some of the lists, people were still getting duplicates. So one quick fix is to just send a set no mail, and at least one of them will stop sending you messages for a while. But then the best thing, of course, is to figure out how to unsubscribe. Usually unsubscribing and resubscribing is the best route. They tell me sometimes if you try to resubscribe when you're already on there, sometimes it won't take it on some lists. If all else fails, find out who the list manager is and contact the list manager and try to get them to help you to get off. One other thing I suggest regarding these email communication is to think about having multiple email addresses. You might have one for different purposes, one just for your school and business purposes, the other for just sort of personal things, or one like these web-based services that you can use all the time when you travel, because you can set them up so that you can get your email from your other accounts by checking other mail and get those there. Also, you probably have the option of getting having an email address from whoever your ISP is, so that's another place to get a second email address.
Oh, a tip. I just learned this one a few weeks ago, at least in IE, and I'm told there's a different mechanism in Netscape. You know, these GIF files that animate, that move all the time, and they're very distracting, banner ads, for one thing. I found if you just click on the stop button on Internet Explorer, they stop, and I think yesterday I was trying the escape button, which I think is a shortcut for stop, and that seemed to work too. So when you get a page with all this stuff flashing and stuff, try tapping the escape button and clicking stop. And then who said?
I added the Netscape.
Yeah, Anna added in Netscape. There is a mechanism, although it's maybe not quite as short. But I love it. Just be able to bam, and it stops all that motion.
Okay.
Windows tips.
Okay, again, shortcut keys. The basic ones are Control-X to cut, Control-C to copy, and then Control-V to paste. These are going to work in all your Windows programs. It's also good whenever you're in an application and you've got a drop-down menu. Look and see what the shortcut keys are. So certain shortcut keys work in all applications. I've talked about this. There's also Control-B for bold, Control-I for italic, Control-E for center.
Yeah, those are important in applications where if your mouse is frozen and for whatever reason, because the window's open, you can't go anywhere, you have to get to the keyboard, do Control-V to paste or that kind of thing. Yeah, it's sometimes the only way you can do these things. The next tip is about optimization. This is just an alternate way to get to the backup or defragmenter or scan disk functions within Windows. You can go through Control Panel and go down a few levels, or one is just to click on the drive itself under My Computer. The other cool part about it is it tells you the last time that you did these on the particular drive, and so you can sort of keep track of the last time you tried to run these optimization programs.
Okay, next is reaching your desktop without minimizing any windows. I've created a shortcut to C:/Windows desktop, and when you click on it, you'll get a folder with your desktop contents. Okay, we can skip the next slide.
No, that's Charles.
Well,
sorry.
I guess you can, but it's my slide. You can also, if you use Windows NT, you can right-click down on the taskbar on an empty spot, and one of the options you get is minimize all windows. And it's a step longer than what Grace is talking about, but it also works. And I believe on all versions of Windows 98, there's an icon in the lower left, at least on my little taskbar, that automatically shrinks all the windows. But the thing Grace is talking about will work on a lot more versions of Windows.
Other thing about the taskbar is remembering that you can start a number of different programs from the taskbar, ones that are there already, as well as adding additional ones there. And checking that, you can always check it by doing the right click on the empty area and click toolbars and make sure Quick Launch is selected to make sure you'll be able to use that.
Oh, yeah, this is the best thing I've ever done on my computer. I created a folder just called Reference for reference materials, which for me is a Copyright Act. It's a report I wrote that I refer to frequently, my resume, and stuff like that don't fit with any particular task, but I use them across a lot of different tasks at irregular intervals. Put a shortcut to that on the Start menu, and so at any time I'm in an application, I can go to the Start menu, I get a list of things, which is in Reference folder is one of them. I click on that, and all these materials, whatever it is I put, are there. And I just find it surprisingly handy for stuff that you can't otherwise find. And you can do it all with shortcuts. It doesn't require reorganizing your hard disk or anything. But it's just a nice little feature that I think is very useful.
And he told you some things that he has there, but put whatever you want, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we talked about house cleaning, doing scan disk and defrag. The other thing you should do is delete unnecessary temp files. Windows shuts down abnormally for any reason. It leaves lots of little files behind. And you may have Windows 98, which does disk cleanup. It still manages to ignore them. To delete the files, you would click on Start and then run Find Files. You can also access this from Explorer. In the named box, you do wildcard-TMP, and it would search the drive, and you would delete all files that didn't have the current date.
Someone has.
Can you, or should you do the same thing with files that begin with a tilde?
I actually don't delete those.
Leave those running?
Yeah. Usually when I'm asked to look at someone's machine, one of the first things I do is look for and delete temporary files. Okay.
That frees up a lot of memory. I learned that tip. I thought it was great. Anybody know about the tilde?
I use one of the Norton utilities, Clean Sweep, that looks for stuff, and it'll display the things. 99% of the tilde files should be deleted, but I realize every time I do it that I happen to put tilde on a couple of things to get them to sort first in list. If you don't do that, I think most of the tilde things can be deleted. But you should look at them at least and see, how that looks.
Okay, it's good to always or periodically empty your recycle bin, and then you're always asked, do you want to delete this file, or whenever you're in Explorer. So if you want to turn that off, you would go to Recycle, right-click on that, select Properties, and then where it says Display Delete Confirmation, you uncheck that box. So the next time you restart Windows, that'll take place. You can also create a shortcut in the recycle bin from the recycle bin to your Send To folder and delete files that way. And the next slide shows us the instructions. Okay.
One of the things that I find it's helpful to save time is you can create an applications folder. You can do it. I'm sorry, skip one. This is toolbars in any of your programs, just customizing your toolbars so that the things that you use most often, instead of pulling down file menus all the time, you can go at most places to preferences or tools, set up something like that, and it will give you a place to customize all these toolbars, and it'll save you a lot of time. You just click on the icon and get there. The thing that I was going to rush to was setting up this folder called Applications, or whatever you want to call it, but I put it there with a lot of shortcuts. And where I set mine up is the Windows desktop folder, and then it resides right on your desktop, and you can get to all those programs really quickly. And the instructions are there on the side. I think we sort of talked about this. This is the quick launch thing again. You can put different programs in the quick launch for your toolbar. Now we're going to talk about instructional design and presentations with our expert here, Brian, who I hear gave a really great presentation at Bricks and Bytes, so some of this came from those kinds of presentations.
Yeah, maybe a few of you here who went to the ABA Bricks and Bytes conference, I gave a presentation about designing for distance learning when it comes to classrooms and law school buildings. And most of these are sort of some condensation of a few of the ideas that I've had here. Now really working about 5 or 6 years on design of classrooms and doing quite a bit of distance learning. And I guess this could either be the first point or the last point. The first is that faculty really listen to other faculty when it comes to using technology, and and I think that it's always a great idea to try to maybe get a few faculty members together who can then maybe present to other faculty members what it is that they do. Clearly you're going to make a lot more progress if you're in support staff by doing it that way rather than just confronting faculty members or trying to putting them in a position that they'll become more defensive. So that's I think just sort of one thought about how to go about this. Another idea that we came up with in some of our distance learning applications was that unlike what we saw with Peter Martin from Cornell, where we had the video going in that meeting in order to conduct in that meeting, most of our distance learning has been done through ISDN lines and codecs, where you get a much higher quality video picture than you do with NetMeeting. The ISDN lines allows you to create a direct connection from one classroom to another classroom, and it works really well that way. But the problem you have is that if you're trying to put any sort of computer application through the ISDN lines, it loses a lot of resolution. So what we found really useful was to have the video in the distance learning go through the ISDN line, but set up a net meeting between two computers in the classroom. This allows the people who are in the remote location to take control of whatever applications are on the desktop, and so you're projecting the computer that's located in the classroom, through net meeting, and you get the native resolution of whatever's going on in that computer that's being projected, in your classroom. And so, net meeting really has, a utility beyond just the video that we saw the other day. Another point of that is that you can open up chat sessions within that meeting. We'd often open up a couple of chat sessions. One clearly between the faculty who's in one room and then the faculty who's in the remote location, so that if you're doing this text messaging back and forth to each other, you can conduct the class a lot more efficiently because you don't have to stop and say, wait a minute, let's talk about how we're about to go about it. But the faculty from one location can just send the message to another one through the net meeting. So another good use for net meeting that isn't using the video portion of it.
Heavy-handed.
I never got the examples to you, did I?
But this is one of yours. I stole it from you.
Oh, it is? Okay. You can do your own templates in PowerPoint. If you're sick of these, you can buy add-on packages, I'm sure, as well, but if you're sick of all the PowerPoint templates that you use, just bring up a blank presentation and diddle around with it, put some lines, put some colors, put some logos, do whatever you want to with it, and then there's a file save as template feature. And once that's done, it becomes a template just like any other PowerPoint template, and you can use it for further presentations. And I've done 2 or 3 from scratch just because I got bored with the regular ones. It's pretty easy to do, and it's pretty effective. Yeah, and sometimes I feel like I can't quite get the text and pictures I want on the slide size that PowerPoint gives you. It's just not quite wide enough or tall enough or something. PowerPoint lets you customize the size of any slide to anything you want to. You can pick standard formats like A4, letter size, screen size, and so on. But you can also just say, I want my slides to be 3 inches by 1.5 inches, or whatever the measurement is, and you can just make your own size. Now, when you do them in a slideshow viewer, you'll get a black band a little bit at the top and bottom if it's long that way. But sometimes that just works better for the kind of material that you're trying to show, and you should just know it's there. It's an option. You can just change that ratio any way you want to and make that the way your slideshow looks.
Once you get those done, you have some materials. Right.
To go back to the distance learning situation, this is sort of a general comment, but whenever you're doing a distance learning kind of course, it's great to have everything on the web. I mean, it makes so much sense to have all your materials available so you can use it in class. Once again, if you're going to be using the net meeting, people can share the control of the computer, and all your materials are right there available to be projected in class. And then the other part is that it allows people to interact outside of class over the web. So just sort of a general point about that.
These next few tips are for me is just about using basically what I use with respect to creating things for my classes. For creating web pages, I found that Adobe PageMill is a very simple program. I know a lot of people use FrontPage, but PageMill is very simple to use. A lot of faculty can use that without much trouble, and it has the upload feature, which is easy. If you have a server, you just kick it up there. The other program that some of us have started to use is Adobe Go Live, which gives you more control over Java and stuff like that. But I will warn you, it takes more than just sitting down and using it. You're going to have to sit down and work with it a while. But those are 2 programs from Adobe that I find helpful. Also, Adobe Acrobat allows you to use PDF files. You can exchange them with your students and do editing back and forth and things like that, and then put them on your website. So it's another Adobe program I find is helpful. If you have space on a school server where you load your files, I found that this program, WSTFP95, is a really good place, a really good file that you can use just uploading files if you don't want to go through something like PageMill, which has the install feature built in. You can find it a lot of places. That's just one site that I give you. The other option you might think about is X-Drive to at least exchange files. They'll give you a certain amount of free space there, and so you can go to this site and sign up for it.
I started using X-Drive recently, and they give you 25 to boot to start with, and then the more you access it, once I accessed it 10 times, they increased the space available to 35 megabytes.
When you're creating web pages, I think there are a number of things that some of us forget to think about. I forget to think about them sometimes, but you have to think about there are a lot of different people that are looking at your web page. and you might think about making them accessible to more people. I said left out of space here. But this site at the bottom, as I said, this will be up on the web. You might take a look at it because it talks about making websites more accessible to other people. Sometimes you don't think about what colors might be. People out there that are colorblind, for example, or visually impaired or whatever. And this site will give you a lot of helpful hints about that. Now these are really just sort of quick. PowerPoint, creative ways. They gave us all Windows 2000, so I guess we're going to all switch to PowerPoint now. I suppose I'm using PowerPoint here because I'm pulled to it. I also use presentations a lot. This is a book I received in the mail recently. Maybe most of you got it, PowerPoint for Litigators, but I thought it was really good because especially if somebody's just starting out in PowerPoint. It comes from NETA, and it's aimed at people that are doing stuff that's related to law. And so it's really helpful. It talks both about PowerPoint 2000 and 97. It recommends actually that we stay with 97 because it says it's better for law-related things than 2000. I haven't used 2000 yet. So that's a good resource you might look for in your library if you didn't get it. Also, as I say, I use Corel presentations. I teach a lot of statutory courses, and I just find that easier to do sort of statutory excerpts and things like that. So I use it for that. A lot of people here saw the smart board presentations. We don't have one in my school. I don't know if any other panels have them, but they look pretty helpful. I think for me, it seems that they would work better in some of our smaller classrooms. In our large classrooms, we have big overhead projectors and screens, but I would like to consider the smart board. There are a number of different places you can go for information for these electronic whiteboards. Generally, I attended a session yesterday, Samford Law School, and this last reference there, they put up a website which gives you a lot of information about how they're using the smart board and things you need to consider about the smart board. So if you're considering an electronic whiteboard, I think that's a good source to go to and get some information. I'm going to move from that then to some more tips about hardware and facilities. Trotter.
Oh, yeah. If you haven't already gotten it, let me just ask, how many of you use a wheel mouse? And how many of you are using an ordinary mouse? Oh, well, most of you have gotten this tip already. I just switched a while ago and thought it was very handy. But since most of you use them, then I don't need to tell you that they're handy. But they're a good thing if you don't use them, and they're not expensive, of course.
Or a trackball is the other thing you might consider with the wheel features.
Yeah, I know Grace saying she likes to use keyboard strokes. I'm a real mouse user at the desktop. I'm very heavily mouse-oriented, but I've sort of been forced to get more comfortable with keystrokes on a laptop because I don't like the touchpad thing. It's not very handy. I don't like any of the track point gizmos. So I've started learning more Windows shortcuts with keyboards and more application shortcuts, and it's the best thing in the world. If you're on an airplane, you don't have to have a mouse. You don't have to use that stupid track stuff, and it's very nice. Alternatively, let's see. There is an announcement recently of a small wireless mouse made for laptops to use on airplanes and stuff, and I haven't seen it actually on sale, but I've heard something about it, so I'm going to keep my eyes open, and I think it's a good thing to use. I don't know, let's see. Yeah, I have a wireless one at home, and that's easily available now, but I'm talking about there's also going to be a smaller one for laptops. But also, speaking of small ones, there are a lot of small mice now made, even with a wire, for laptops. Now, this is a Sony one that's made by Sony for the Sony Vaio, which is what I have. But there's a couple of companies now that make really tiny little mice with a wire, and they're made for laptops in cramped quarters, and they have relatively short wires, relatively small thing. But they're actually quite handy. This is really a very useful thing. This one happens to plug into a USB port. I don't know what the other ones do, but if you...
I have plugs into just the regular
port. Yeah, if you're a heavy mouse user and you have a laptop and you travel, you should look for a small mouse. It's very useful.
And this website I gave you is just when I was looking for a reference to tell you where I got mine. Mine is made by PC Concepts, but I found this one. A lot of these are advertised for buying them for kids, but I think they're helpful for us too if you want to travel. But this one is called Tiny Mouse. It's kind of cute, and it combines a feature of having the wheel too. And that's the first one I've seen, the small one like that had a wheel. Okay, we're going to talk for a couple of minutes about some travel tips. I've been traveling a lot in the last year or so, and so I've been looking for all these things. A lot of the airlines are building in these airline adapters. I shouldn't say a lot, a few. if you're in business class or first class, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But if you're going to try that, this Airline Auto Adapter by Extend is a good product. You can also use it in your car. Now you can say work on your car while you're driving. Well, you can recharge it as you're driving. So it has both an auto and an airline adapter. And the other one by Charge Source, and both of those have websites you can go to and look at them. Says you can use it on any kind of electronic equipment. It has lots of different adapters. I don't know if anybody here has tried it, but those are things you might consider for power. The other thing you might consider for power, and I don't have one of these, I saw it demonstrated once, is this thing called Electrofuel, which says it gives you lots and lots of hours. You just put your laptop on top of it, and it fuels your computer for a long time.
So this is like a pad that you
like
put your laptop on it.
Right.
It's better.
And it just goes for hours and hours. It came out last year sometime like that.
Hey, ask you a question about that.
Here's a site for where you can get more information.
Yeah, the auto adapter, or the airplane adapters, do they have to be special for each laptop? Because they all have different. So you have to get one for your laptop.
You have to get Extend makes one for a lot of different laptops, but your laptop manufacturer
You have to get
them
them.
also.
Yeah.
Other thing, looking for power. These are I can get a lot of tips from a lot of different places. Join an airlines club. Can't do that. If you have a Diners Club card, they have a lot of lounges around the world that you can use no matter what airline you're traveling on. But if you don't want to do either one of those, just watch the maintenance people, because they're always plugging in somewhere. And so if you keep track of where they plug in, that's where you plug in when you want to get some more power for your computer.
Or you can do what I do, which is sort of walk around and leer at everybody who's sitting near the wall to see if there's a power plug nearby. And they leer back, but sooner or later you might find an outlet that way.
This one, the other thing you might want to carry around when you're traveling is a palm. We did a palm session last panel, so those materials will be on the web if you want to get some ideas about how you can use a palm instead of carrying your computer around with you.
Oh, right. Oh, shoot. I don't have my... Let me make some idle conversation.
Okay, idle, chit-chat.
If you want to connect a laptop to an Ethernet, a network jack, like if you bring a laptop here to CALI and all these Ethernet things, you may think that what you have to have is an Ethernet card, the little PC card that slides into the slot, and you can get them combined with a modem and stuff, and they cost several $100s. But if your laptop has a USB port on it, there are a number of companies that make an adapter that's USB on one end that goes into your laptop, and then it's a network jack on this end, and this is about $50 or $60. So, and I've been able to take my laptop here at CALI, plug it in, and just shove it into the wall, and it worked, and it was bingo. And so it's a whole lot cheaper than buying the little PC card gizmo that you would otherwise think you have to use for network access.
I thought of the cards are going down in price a lot, though. You can get them anywhere from about $90 to $150.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a question.
Just curious, does that USB device have like standard MAC address or regular Ethernet code?
It's meant for, if this has a, I don't know. I know what a MAC address is, and I don't know. Yeah, I know. Good question. I don't know.
Can you plug it into it?
No, it's every network adapter has a unique number, which is not your IP number. It's something else. Which means all your computers, if you're connected to a network, have a unique serial number already. So if you're worried about privacy, forget it. I don't know. I don't know if these do.
There was a question.
Was there another question?
Well, if it puts your machine on the net, functions as our network, it has to have an address.
It has to. Otherwise, one.
On the basic level, that's where
Okay.
the computers
Okay. Makes sense.
communicate.
Yeah. Okay. So the answer is a must then, I guess. Yeah.
But you didn't have to configure it.
No. Well, there's a little bit of software you load, but it's just on a disk. I didn't have to configure. My machine is set up to accept the dynamically assigned IP address. It's a DHCP server, dynamically assigned IP addresses. I don't have to know what that means, but that's the way CALI's network things are set up. I just plugged in and it worked. Boom. It was just great.
I think it depends on what system. Because, for example, at our school, you have to register your card to get on. But like here, you apparently don't. Everybody can just plug into their system. Now we're going to talk about designing classrooms and video conferencing.
Yeah, the next few slides are a few tips that I've come to learn the hard way, I guess, in many instances. So you're getting the benefit of a lot of mistakes that have been made over the years. But one of the, I think, sort of most obvious things that when you're designing a classroom is to put the screens over, above the blackboards. And I've seen this happen in many schools now where, if there's a screen in the room, it comes down right in front of the blackboard, so you really can't, write while you're in class when the screen is down. So if there's any possible way to get the ceiling height up when you're designing something, it's a great thing to do. The next point has to do with codecs. Most law schools that are being built today have something like a media control center, some sort of central point where you've got video feeds from classrooms going to and from. This building doesn't have one, I don't think, but it's something that when you're doing video conferencing is great because it means that if you, say, get one or two codecs, the gizmos that take the signals and put them out over the ISDN lines, you can route your audio and video signals to that central point, so you don't have to have a codec in each room. I've seen this in a few different schools where if they want to do distance learning, all the equipment is located, in the corner of the classroom. But this way, it allows you to have that one resource and then bring your classroom signals to it. Another idea, and I've seen other people do this, is simply to run dark fiber to the classroom. When you're running the wires, it's a relatively inexpensive thing. When you're in the construction period, it's a lot more expensive after the walls are up. So most everybody is using analog equipment today, because the digital equipment isn't quite there yet. But that if you are going to be engaging in any sort of construction project, running the fiber at this point and leaving it dark, and that means that when you have fiber optic, you terminate the ends of it so that the light can get through it. But if you don't terminate it, it's real cheap. It's just a question of running the fiber. But you might as well do that now because it's pretty inevitable that the digital video and digital audio will be here in just a few years. Another idea is that when you're going to hook up particularly a podium in the front of a classroom and you need to get all these wires from, say, the computer or a touch screen or VCR or whatever it is that you put into that particular piece of equipment, you can have a single plug that plugs into the floor. We debated back and forth at Columbia when we were doing this whether it's the best way to do it. But we have a few years experience now with this. They call it an EDAC cable. EDAC is actually used a lot in the audio world, but we've been able to apply it to both audio and video signals, and it works really well. So that it's just one plug, it goes in. If you want to move this podium around, you just unplug it. It's a pretty neat idea. Another thing that we learned the hard way was that projectors make a lot of noise, and it isn't too bad here at Chicago-Kent, but I've seen it in a number of applications where if you stick a projector in the middle of a classroom, it acts as this noise barrier, and it makes it much more difficult, for students and faculty to interact. And the problem is that if you go to buy a projector in the abstract, you're taking a look at all the specs, the amount of lumens and other things. It doesn't tell you how loud the darn thing is. So I would strongly recommend that before you buy a projector, you go listen to it and figure out just how noisy this thing might be, because it might be really bright, and of course the brighter it is, the more noise it's going to make because you're going to have a heavier duty fan. So it's an issue. Another idea that has worked real well at Columbia is to install what we call auxiliary panels. That would mean, for example, in this room that we'd have a box over in the corner in the back where you can plug in microphones or a control panel or a camera, that kind of thing. And depending on, particularly in distance learning situations, you may want to put a camera in a different location. You may want to do miking in a different place. And unless you run those wires when you're constructing the building once again, it's a difficult thing to do, and it avoids that whole problem of having to run wires all over the place. But the next tip about designing classrooms is that there's a really big difference between NTSC video, the TV video, and computer video, and that really, displays today really only do one or the other well. The next one, that the LCD panels are great. The little ones, the flat panels that you see for computers now work really well for computer display. But interestingly, when you get up to these 40-inch models, the plasma models, they run $9,000-10,000 now. They really don't display computers that well. They display video really well. But I've been around the country now looking at a lot of different classrooms, and people say, "Oh, we'll put a big flat panel, over on the wall somewhere." But the fact is that the resolution on those things really isn't very good. Really, the only way to really project computer is what you're seeing here, is through one of these, projectors. This one happens to be a rear projector, but, it's really the only way to go about it to get a big image at this point. And you can make a big mistake by, spending $10,000, $15,000 on these humongous panels, and you're going to have just, lousy computer video on it. On the other side of that, when we do distance learning, we use large TVs, 36-inch monitors, in order to get the signal, the video signal for the other side, as high resolution as we can. For example, if we were going to do distance learning off of this projector in this room, the resolution really isn't all that great. You can do it, the video is pretty good, but if you had a large TV monitor, you'd actually be much better. I mean, one of the things about distance learning is that the higher resolution you have for the video to see the other side, the more lifelike that experience actually is. And so that if you degrade the resolution at all, the people just seem that much farther away. So that's, the point being that, computer video and regular NTSC video, have specific kinds of ways of projecting them, and you really have to be careful about it.
We use, this is quite the same thing, but in some of our smaller classrooms, we have a couple of those destination systems, and they seem to work very well with respect to students being able to see them from all over the room. So if you don't want to put the projection screen in rooms that size.
Right.
Another thing you might think about is getting a digital camera. If somebody have one to hold up, I didn't bring mine to show as a sort of a sample. Usually there's somebody in the room with one. But one of the things you can do with them, of course, is, if you're thinking about making graphics and things and you're looking for a picture, you can go and take your own picture and quickly throw it up in your presentation. This actually happens with the camera that I have right now.
How did you take a picture of your camera?
I'm not going to tell you. I actually have 2 digital cameras. How about that? But it's a helpful thing to have, and they're coming down in price. So, plus your school could buy it. You don't have to buy it. Okay, now we're going into sort of miscellaneous tips and hopefully get some from you. You can get a lot of tips from this site, Clipboard. They have all different kinds of lists you can subscribe to. And what they do is send you a tip a day about whatever you want to know about that has something to do with electronics. And so if you're not getting enough mail, then you can get more mail from Clipboard. It says it's the internet's #1 source for computer tips, news, and gossip. And like I said, whatever you think you're interested in, they'll send you a tip a day on that.
I also went to About.com in preparing for this panel, and both for Windows and Windows 98, EdBot writes a weekly column of tips, and you can also get an email sent to you either once a week or once a day.
Another thing, there may be some terminology either that someone used here or someone you've heard in a conference somewhere. I found this is a good site to go and check on some of the terminology. It will give you a little definition, and then it will link you to some websites that talk more about that particular technology.
There's also a website called What Is, which does another dictionary website.
Okay, that's the end of our tips. Does anybody have any questions or yes?
I got 2 or 3 not related things that you guys had suggested. One of them was you mentioned the Clipboard keystroke shortcuts, but you left out a very important one, which is Control-Z.
Okay.
The undo keystroke.
All right.
Which is one
That's very good.
Okay, so for the
doesn't work in all applications, but it's great.
So for the
a side light on those keystrokes.
Can everybody hear what he's saying? Control-Z? Okay.
A side light on the keystrokes is if you are dealing with faculty members who are technophobes, who like their DOS word perfect and are not about to change to do anything else, one of the things that you can tell them is that after they move to Windows, it's okay to use keystrokes, and some of them are very relieved that they can still do that, so that can help. The other thing was you mentioned search sites. There is a piece of downloadable software that actually there's a bunch of different search sites. It's called Coppernic, COPERNIC, and I think it's at coppernic.com. And it's a downloadable piece of software that you can put on your desktop that you can type your searches in, pull it out, type your searches in, and it'll run like 20 different search engines all at once and produce the best ones, the best results that come up in all of those search engines. And that's the one that I use instead of Google. And then the last thing on the projection screens up above the Blackboard, if you got whiteboards instead, one other alternative is not use the projection screen at all, but to project directly onto the whiteboard so that you can write with the markers on whatever it is that you have to be projecting.
Yeah, I just heard that someone gave that tip the other day. I had never thought about that. So instead of, getting a smart board that you're going to mark on, that you just use your old whiteboards and use your projection screen that's already there, and you can mark on it that way.
InfoSeek also makes a downloadable product that's free where you put on your machine and it runs searches for you, and you can save your searches, and if you're willing to pay $150, it will run the searches on a regular basis for you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.